Okay, let's see the last steps of the panel number 2. Let's take a look at how we take a perspective. So let's go, for example, to one of the interior perspectives that we looked at. So you could take this perspective in a couple ways. You can just, have it a scale of 9 and then turn on the graphic options that we talked about. That would be, again, shadows. You like those. Change the particular aspects of the lighting, one more sun. You can maybe introduce more light if you want to, or reduce the shadow intensity. And then you can also obviously set the sun to a different moment if you like to test the different options. So you can say apply here, start changing the different settings to see if there's one that you prefer, and with the time, as it changes, you might have different impressions of it. Okay, so that would be the kind of rendering. Maybe we can get rid of the lines, which are, well, those are a little tricky here. But in general, I think this is something that should work. I think you can do this sketchy. It makes it a bit, you can try those things, but it just changes the type of line that defines those things. I don't think it's like really of that interest, sketchy lines option. So maybe you want to try that, or maybe you want to try just the cast shadows without much shadows intensity. But again, you can modify this as you see fit. Of course, that's how we take that. Well, you can export this as an image, which is the same way we did PNG, 100%, or you can take it further up to whatever percent, because this you can scale in InDesign afterwards. But you can also just print and go to the option PDF, select the view that's perspective interior 1. So we can go to perspective interior 1. There is, and you can do several of them, of course, but the one is the one that I'm doing right now. And then you can just select the settings, same as always, and then here your raster processing. It doesn't matter if you have a vector processing. The second you have shadows and shading options, it's going to do a raster processing. And you can take that to presentation in the hopes that this is improved. So you can do this. Okay. Oh, I don't want to save it. And then, okay. So this is what it's saying, variable rasters. So it doesn't matter that you say vector base, got raster, nevertheless. Close that. And there you go. Perspective material 1. And this is a perspective. This again is not the highest quality, but I think for what we want, it's more than enough. It's, I think, quite simple drawing type of document. So I'll save that, go back to InDesign. We're placing those here on the bottom. So Control D for placing. And searching for that one, open. And remember that here we don't really care if it's scaled or not. So we can definitely scale those up, crop the edges, no problem. Allocate them where we want them to be. And text, remember, of course, to bring those into private image layer. And under the text, T for text, and you can write down here perspective, from blah, blah, blah. No, so that would be the title of that. You might want to consider taking it to, or consider whatever sizes you're working with, and obviously to the same font that you're working on. That would be, in my case, Calibri. And if you remember, the text probably should be on top of the images here. So, oh, that's perfectly written. Perspective from blah, blah, blah. So that could be kind of naming. You can align this properly and do, the different drawings and place them where you think they should be. Here we're going to say display, so you can see that it looks quite nice. Then you're going to have one, you can have two landscapes here, or a big landscape here, two portrait afterwards. So the idea is that you test different perspectives of different qualities, so you understand your space as best as possible, and you start looking for the wow moments of your project. No, okay, so it's not so different from how would be the lighting study, light study, sun study. So what we're going to do is duplicate these elements, rename, and I'm going to call it something like perspective sun one or sun, so something you don't know what's going on, and then set the solar analysis on settings, set the solar analysis to still, summer, and okay. So that will give you the shadows here. In this particular case, you might want to go to graphic displays and make sure that maybe the shadows are a bit more, intense. So you might want to go to the lighting and make it darker, so you emphasize where the light is versus where it's not it. So that could be one. So that would be sort of one. You can rename it as summer. Then you duplicate again, rename, winter, go back to sun setting, same still, winter solstice, and then, okay, so that's where the sun's coming. Save that, duplicate, rename, spring, sun setting, still, spring equinox. So that would be the three main ones. I mean, you can do fall, but it's just the same spring. And then the important thing is that you understand what this means. It means that in the spring equinox, which is at 2 p.m., it's the highest point of the sun of the, March 20th. Now this is set to 2:10, which is kind of doesn't make sense. But anyway, it's really not different at all. Different times of history. So that will be particular setting. You can also take a whole day or so on, but for the purpose of our studies, we only want the image, still images at a particular point, summer, winter, spring. You can bring fall, but it's going to be quite similar. So, okay. So you bring all of those and you have three different ones, and then you can print. So you go print, PDF, creates difference. Here you select, go to the perspectives and select the ones that apply. Setup, I think tablet still relevant, center, zoom, presentation quality. And you say, okay, so we have everything set. And what we're doing is basically three PDFs of the spring. Of summer. and of the winter. Those are 3 different PDFs. You can allocate them in the place that, pretty much left for those over here. You can put them somewhere else if you think it's easier for you. No problem. Okay, so now it's the world of axonometrics, sectional axonometrics. I think we kind of did this already. So we're talking of these type of drawings. I think they're important and valuable, so you probably want to choose one of the boxes to make sure it's one of the isometric options. And it's just the same way. You go print, you make sure you take that particular view, and in this case, just maybe you want to set the PDFs. Let me do it. Select views, and again, you might want to do this all quite at the end, so you can have all of the views at the same time. Exterior, 3D, section. So you would say select, setup. In this case, doesn't have any render quality, so just make sure it's vector based, center. In this case, we can do center and fit to page because we don't care about the scale too much. You can say okay. Sorry, I don't want to save that. And then okay. So it's saved, brings it back. Once it's done, we place it in the InDesign. There it is. So we get Control D. Here we don't care too much if we want to stretch that up. Might want to move it around, or might want to make it smaller, bigger. We want to do a label for everything. So the ones that really matter, we don't change the scale unless we change it in Revit first and then bring it here. But these ones could be perfectly fine. And again, if we haven't added any shadows, these are vector based, so perfectly crispy and nice and elegant. Okay, so you can chop. You can just turn on the section box into other variations. In a place where you see the sections, maybe a different angle, and then do print of this one. And you can change the box for different views. Maybe one thing, if you're cutting the project, you might want to apply the same format template. So is the view template here is the presentation clean doc that we used. So that gives you that kind of a section quality cut. Okay, so then you apply it and then you print it. So that gives you that. You can get those. You can also have a clean one and decide that you might want to, let me turn on visibility graphics and go to the mouses and uncheck them. So that would be a drawing that you can have, but you can have one where you make, for example, the roof a little bit transparent. The way to do that is under visibility graphics, go to the roof here, and then go to the surface transparency here. You can override that. You can apply it to see how it looks more or less. And maybe it's not enough. Maybe you want to add a bit more to 50. So then you get to see the guts behind this. No? So that could be a nice. But you could also say, well, I like this one clean as it was before, and then I duplicate and I change that transparency and I duplicate again. And I rename this and I call it clean. Something like no walls or something like that. And then you select the chain of walls. by pressing tab, and you can hide the elements here. You can hide the columns and hide the windows and even hide the roof and have it as a kind of like the guts of the project in an interesting way, no? You might want to hide some of the elements individually because you don't like them and show this in a particular way. You might even say, well, I'd like to highlight some of these, interesting walls. You can go to visibility graphics, remove diagrams about this. So you can go to walls, and on the projection surface, you can override this and say, I'm going to create some kind of diagonal pattern to it in a, I don't know, gray tone or blue tone, whatever it is. And that just for all the walls, use that nice curvature feeling. So then you have that, and that would be perfectly vector based, no? So you could change that, of course, and make it in many ways. So you could just say, I'm gonna go radical here. It's gonna make it like, or maybe red is not the answer for anything. Neither orange, but just to give an example. And there we go. So the walls that we have created become orange, and then it has this kind of interesting, but you could also say, well, the floors are going to be the ones diagrammatically done. So the patterns are going to be in a different tone, like cyan. Again, I'm not saying that you do this, but I think for studio, it could be a nice way of generating diagrams that explains where the different things are in a more powerful way. And again, this would be print, and this is vector based if it's clean visibility, if it's generating visibility graphics. Okay. And you could combine this and then have a realistic where the trees are that will be used. You can have both together, combine a vector base in a render base, as long as you do it in Illustrator. Okay. So those are places we mentioned, each of them one by one. They need labels. We have the solar. The last thing I want to talk about is the explored analysis. So what I would do is go to one of the most general ones. Let me go back to the original simple setting, clear overrides here. Let's say you have this simple element and you want to do an export analysis. The first thing you should do is okay, rename, and I'm going to say clean, exploded, something that's clear and straightforward. The way export analysis work is that if you select an object, you can do what is called the displays element. So you can click on displays and it brings a gizmo that you can move things around without affecting the project. If you try to move something like that without displays, it would be a mess, no? And you can do that for a single element if you know that's the element, but you can also select a bunch of things, filter out, let's say check none and say floors, for example, and then displays all of the floors, no? So then they come up. That could be the floors. And then you can do all of the structure, for example, filter, say none, and then say something like structure elements. Okay, and then displace it. You might want to take that up here. They're all groups, so if you want to displace one floor different from the other one, you're going to have to displace first one floor and then the other ones. And then you might want to take the walls around. So I'm going to select all of these elements, for example, and then displace that and use this option here to go around. Displays. So you have to keep in mind that you probably want a specific view. So move things in accordance to that view. So I'll make it closer. Some of them farther away. So some of them could stay in the middle, maybe, or maybe not. It's up to you. And the way it works is that you can also select one of the pieces and create a path. You can select the path of the origin of some of the points. So any point around. That gives that relationship aspect, no? You can keep on moving things around if you need. You can duplicate this and assign colors to different parts, to walls and so on. And this is again another print. So you will print, you would probably in this case do tabloid and fit to screen, fit to paper. So it really, you make sure that it's inside the paper and then you place it into InDesign. So one thing we can do afterwards as well, if I print this, select the view, check all of them, make sure it's 3D, exterior volume exploded. Here it is. Select the option, tablet sounds good, fit to page, center, presentation, doesn't really matter because again, it's going to be vector based. I'm not adding any shadows here. Say okay. Yes. Explode it. And once it's done, what we'll do is place it. There's the PDF. Control D in InDesign. Here, the scale doesn't really matter. So I'm going to place it more or less. Scale it. What does matter is that you don't scale it, affecting its proportion, that you actually scale it properly. Not the things that we could do here is annotate using the text and the symbols. So if I do symbols, for example, use the pen tool, click 1, 2, recommend. Let me do that. Delete that. So I do it again. Pen tool, under symbols, click 1, click 2, press shift to have an ortho element, and then this could be a particular line that is respectful, not a thick line, maybe 120 to make a grayscale. Oops. Know that if it's the same number, it's basically a grayscale. So you can say that. Maybe it's too thick. So we can go to properties and change the line weight to something thin and nice, but we can also go to the stroke and create a kind of a font that is a little cute. Could be like a square, but it could be also like a nice circle, indicating this is what that is. And then you can add a text using the layer text here, Command T, and roof. And you could say project roof or whatever roof. I mean, in theory, that's pretty much about it. Not much more to say in this case, unless you know more details about it. I'm going to align it to the right. I want to make sure it's the same fonts as the rest. Just Calibri. Maybe it's actually bold, I don't know, or italic if you want it. And then you can just duplicate these ones to indicate the different options. And this, you could revise it and force. And you can add levels maybe, and then start indicating more things here and there. I'm copying, and I'm copying. And some of them obviously gonna have to change. Pressing A, selection tool, this one and this one. And there you go. So you start leaving things, and that's pretty much how we're thinking of annotating particular for analysis. You could potentially annotate axonometric or anything else, a plan, but in theory, I think that the express is the one that we're looking for to have annotated. Needless to say that you can add, in studios, you can add particular shading for these three-dimensional views and get more creative with how you present these things in different ways. Okay, I think we're done with this. There's a couple more ingredients that I was suggesting that you could do, which are these particular elements. One of them is, let me hide this. One of them is the honors assignment or extra grade is the vector plus render section detail. So I'll explain that in class, but you could almost understand what is it about. And then go back to Rhino from Revit and introduce an element. That one, probably do a video during one of the class and post it at the end of this sequence. Okay, we're done.